So WWDC26 was Tim Cook's last WWDC, and it was a very interesting one at that. Like, instead of announcing a lot of big new features, it really felt like they focused on refining their OSs and creating smaller but more useful features. And it also kind of felt like WWDC24 Part 2. We'll get more into that later, but let's start off with probably Apple's two biggest operating systems, iOS and iPadOS. So Liquid Glass is now smarter and has a dedicated toggle in settings to control clearness and opacity, and as for speed, opening apps is now 30% faster, and airdropping is even now a crazier 80% faster. Other smaller things include custom EQ on AirPods and kind of new app icons, and as I said earlier, these are smaller upgrades, but if you do want to learn about basically the biggest upgrade to all of the OSs, then make sure to stick around. As for macOS, it's called macOS Golden Gate, and yes, it did come from Apple's crack marketing team and did include a pretty fun skit. What the new update brings is a more uniform toolbar and more uniform window corners, plus Safari now has tab groups, and one thing that I didn't know that the Mac didn't have, but now that it does have, is swipe down to refresh. Lastly, the platforms that got the least amount of screen time, watchOS and visionOS. So on watchOS, you can now tap once to open the Smart Stack, and there's also a brand new dynamic app grid. Meanwhile, visionOS is letting you turn panoramic photos into spatial scenes. Then if you want, you can use that scene as an environment. But all of that was a very small part in this year's keynote. The biggest announcement was the new Siri, and this is where the WWDC Part 2 comes in, because you might remember back in 2024, they announced that Siri would be getting smarter, and we'd be able to... Because you might remember that back in 2024, Apple announced that Siri would be getting smarter and know you better, but as you probably know, that never happened. Well, not until now. 2 years later, or 2 years later. Because now it can actually understand what you're saying with these four new major pillars: personal context, world knowledge, app actions, and on-screen awareness. This means you could ask us something like, where was this photo taken, which would be using world knowledge. Then you could say, is this near Jeff? And that would be personal context. Then you could finish it all off by saying, take me there, and add a stop at Jeff's, which is super cool. Siri also got a makeover and now looks like this, and it kind of reminds me of the old waveform Siri mixed with the circle Siri and the glowing Siri sprinkled in with a little liquid glass and chrome, but it also kind of just reminds me of a marble. But one interesting thing is that in all the demos, they showed it popping out of the dynamic island, and that just makes me wonder, how does it look on phones like the 16E and 17E, which have notches? One thing that I do fully know is that if you do swipe down on Siri's first response, then you get a full chat experience that kind of reminds me of a ChatGPT, Gemini, or Claude experience. It even saves all your chats into a new dedicated Siri app, which is on basically all of Apple's platforms, including watchOS, and if you're on a Mac, you can even drag files into Siri. They also announced that Siri is now called Siri AI, and I would just like to ask if we could get Apple's crack marketing team on this name, because it's kind of bland. Plus, probably one of the coolest new things with Siri is that you can change its pace and expressivity.
Hi, let's find the right voice for you. I'll practice some things I like to say while you listen. Let me try this one out. You have one new message. Here's another one. Your timer is set for 1 minute. Now for some directions. At the next stop sign, turn right.
So, nice. But wait, how did all this all of a sudden work so well? Well, the plot twist is that Apple is officially partnering with Google to create the next generation of Apple Intelligence, mixing Apple's foundation models with Google's Gemini models to create the next generation of Apple Foundation models. And of course, throughout the keynote, Apple kept on playing that Apple logo in the shape of a lock form, satisfyingly clicking down, and how your data is only processed on device or on private cloud compute where Apple can't even see it themselves. This new Apple Intelligence is the thing that powers most of the new, smarter features that are way more useful. And one thing that I did notice is that they're getting some new features that kind of resemble Android and other Google platforms. Because iMessage now has smart suggestions, the phone app now can pull relevant information for you while you're on a call, and Shortcuts now lets you be able to describe what you want to be a shortcut in natural language. Lastly, let's talk about some of the new image tools. So Image Playground can now make more realistic images, and even though they didn't explicitly say it, I think it's powered by the new Nano Banana models. Visual Intelligence is coming to the Mac, and it's also now smarter and can show you things like nutrition for food. But now let's talk about some features that will make you wonder, what's actually a photo anymore? Because they have added 3 new tools into the Photos app, including Smarter Cleanup, so hopefully objects won't turn into a blobby mess, a feature that lets you make the frame of a photo larger, and last and definitely the weirdest, reframing that allows you to shift the perspective of a 2D shot. So my thoughts on the new Apple OSs is that they're becoming more useful, smarter, and customizable, and I like the idea of being able to ask Siri something and she won't say, "Here's what I found on the web." But I also do wonder if this will make people interact less with their apps. Maybe not. So I was originally planning to give each platform a specific rating, but since Apple Intelligence was woven through each of the platforms, I think I'm just gonna give WWDC26 an exclamation point. I do know that some of these features might not work as planned, but also I'm just glad that they're actually releasing these features unlike in 2024. But before you go, I want to give you an interesting stat. All the iPhones that supported iOS 26 are getting iOS 27. And yes, that does mean that the iPhone 11 does support iOS 27, and that also means that this is the biggest generation of iPhones that support one iOS. But one sad and very surprising thing is that watchOS 27 is only supported on Apple Watch Series 9 and newer and Apple Watch Ultra 2 and newer, which means that they drop support for the Apple Watch Series 6, the Apple Watch Series 7, my watch, the Apple Watch Series 8, and the Apple Watch Ultra 1. Crazy. So thanks so much for watching this video, and if you did enjoy this video, please consider pressing that subscribe button. Bye. Oh, did you notice what I have back here? I spent a while on this, but see?